a very important issue for UPSC civil service mains examinations from Indian economy, which is always confuse the students. Why sometime Indian economy come under the problem of high inflation and low growth rate? Sometime economy come under the problem of high inflation and low economic growth. Low economic growth. That is the short term phenomena and not a long term phenomena. For example, during 2009 to 14, that is the time period of government, where you can see the growth rate was only 4.5% in our GDP. This was the GDP growth rate. Other side, the inflation rate was 10.1% per year. That was the inflation rate. Now you can see the growth rate only 4.5% and inflation rate was 10.1% during this time period. That is the problem of high inflation and low growth rate. Prior to explain, students try to know me about me. I am teaching economy here and there in different reputed as well as in my own institute, and you can see that kinds of problems you can solve in our YouTube channel, the Economica IAS. Subscribe it and you will regularly get that kinds of problematic issues which is always confuse the students non-economic background specifically. And today I will explain this with the help of first technical factor which are responsible, after then long-term factor which are sustaining the Indian economy under the problem of low growth and high inflation. First you come on the technical issues, why that kinds of problem are occurring during this time period. As you know, prior this time period, or you can say in September 2008, what is the basic problem? There was the subprime crisis in America, subprime crisis in USA. This subprime crisis of USA leads the global economy in recession. In recession, due to it, the global GDP growth rate, global GDP growth rate suddenly declined from 4.4% to 2.4% in the year 2009 and 10. 9 and 10. Due to global recession, our government have to follow expansionary monetary and fiscal policy. Expansionary fiscal policy for the solution of this problem. As you know, during the recessionary conditions, aggregate demand suddenly decline. Suppose this is aggregate supply, say this is aggregate demand, and when this suddenly decline from AD to AD dash, the national income growth rate also, or GDP growth rate also decline from OY to OY dash. This decline in growth rate, why it was? It was because of sudden decline in aggregate demand. Sudden decline in aggregate demand, and ultimately you can also understand in the financial year 2008 and 9, India's GDP growth rate was 9.4% per year, and suddenly during 2009 and 10 it declined up to 6.4%. Our GDP growth rate also declined, and as you know, under these unfavorable conditions, our government as well as China economy follow the expansionary fiscal policy, means more public expenditure than income. Means one side government were increasing the public expenditure, other side tax exemptions, tax relaxations were there. Ultimate target was to enhance or increase the aggregate demand. Under this policy, suddenly our fiscal deficit, which was only 2.5% of GDP, 2.5% of GDP during the financial year 2007 and 8. Again, it began to increase, and in the year 2009 and 10, it reached up to the 6.6% of GDP. Now, there are some technical words which I am using here, and some extent you are maybe confused regarding these kinds of points. But I explain first it. Fiscal deficit means more public expenditure than income. And you also know, income means total output of goods and services. Expenditure means total money expenditure by the government supply. If money supply grow greater than output in the economy, it will begin to increase the price of the commodities. Price of the commodities. And government will check and balance this increasing inflation. Generally, we define persistent rise in price as inflation. And as I told you, our inflation rate during this time period was 10.1% per year. Government tried to counter this inflation through tough monetary policy. But prior to explain the effect of monetary or tough monetary policy on our GDP growth rate, I will explain the effect of increasing fiscal deficit on our balance of payment. As you know, in our balance of payment, there is the two account. One is current account, other is capital account. In current account, we deals in three items: export and import of commodity, export and import of services, export and import of transfer payment. Transfer payment. As you know, the export and import of commodity is known as trade account deficit. Export and import of commodities, services and transfer payment, generally known as current account deficit. And as I discuss with you, with increasing fiscal deficit, price were increasing. If price is increasing means price of export also increasing, price of import also increasing. If price of export is increasing means what? Our export will decline, import will increase. Increasing import and decreasing export increase the current account deficit. Now you are clear about the 2 points. When world recession were there, government follow the expansionary fiscal policy, and this expansionary fiscal policy, by increasing the price, began to decrease the export, it began to increase the import. Why? Because price of export, if I give you the point this, prior the price of export were increasing, price of import also increasing, price of export were increasing, price of import also increasing, that decreasing the export, that increasing the import. In this way, we are increasing the current account deficit. Increasing current account deficit, increasing the external borrowing for the maintenance of this deficit, external borrowing. Increasing external borrowing, also increasing the interest payment liabilities, means increasing interest payment began to increase the fiscal deficit. In this way, fiscal deficit and current account deficit became reversible to each other, means they began to reinforce to each other. One side increasing fiscal deficit, increasing the current account deficit, other side increasing current account deficit began to increase the fiscal deficit. That phenomena were persisting, and the outcome of this phenomena were increasing price in the economy. To counter this increasing price, what the government do? Tough monetary policy. Tough monetary policy means government try to reduce the money supply through the increasing different monetary norms like repo rate, reverse repo rate, etc., etc. Then what the government do for that pollution problem? As the government decrease the money supply, rate of interest began to increase, that decreased the private sector investment. This is known as crowding out effect. Crowding out effect. In this way, in short run, that problem leads the economy in low growth, high inflation. But there are certain long-term factors which I discuss now. Prior you clear about the long-term, short-term factor, what is happening during this period. Other factors which are responsible for that kinds of problem in our economy, you have to also understand. Now come on the issue that what are the long-term factors responsible for these kinds of problem in our economy. Come. That is economic sectors and factors contributing this low growth rate. Infrastructure constraints. These are certain factors which are persistently responsible for our low growth rate in our economy. Deficiency of infrastructure facilities, as you know, it includes road, airways, waterways, etc., which always create hurdle in the development policy. Second, policy implementation challenges like inconsistent policy implementations creates uncertainty and deters potential investors. As I recently discussed, due to worldwide recessions, expansionary fiscal policies, then tough monetary policy, crowding out. Why? That is the point of lack of coordinations in our economic policies. That is also the factor in short as well as in long term. Deficiency of human capital means there is the need of which one? Human capital for the better development of our economy. But we always face some kinds of constraints in the availability of skilled labor, skilled management according to requirement of our domestic as well as global economy. Other factor, supply demand imbalances. As you know, as I explain all the fundamental factors responsible for the problem of that kinds of high inflation, low growth rate in short term, they also supported by long term factor like this, as I code you, like supply demand imbalances. Discrepancies between supply and demand contribute to price inflation in essential commodities. Why the demand and supply problem is there? As I code you, one side our investment is decreasing. If our investment is decreasing, investment were decreasing means supply were decreasing. Other side demand were increasing. Why this demand were increasing? More fiscal deficit by the government, more public expenditure. In this way, supply is less, demand is more, responsible for which one? Increasing price in our economy. You can understand supply demand imbalances in this way during this time period. Monetary policy impact, as I priorly discussed, tough monetary policy. Why? Because of high inflation, 10.1% inflation rate were there. That is why government of India follow the tough monetary policy, and it again began to work fuel in fire, and finally it leads the economy in high inflation and low growth rate. External sector dynamics, as I explained you, in global economy, one side recession. In global economy, if there is the recession, understand that one. Suppose this is I for India, global economy for W, world. If India's investment is increasing, its income definitely will increase. But in global economy, investment is decreasing, income is decreasing, their import also decreasing. That is why our export also decreasing. One side investment increasing, income is increasing in India, but our export were increasing because of decreasing import of global economy. Finally, this leads the economy in high current account deficit. As you know, in our total with respect of GDP, 40% contributed by the foreign trade. It means internal factor determine our GDP by 60%. If we think about national income 60% contributed by domestic factor, and 40% contributed by external trade. That is also the factor for that kinds of problem in our economy. There are some other factor which I give you, that is the impact of low growth and high inflation. What is the impact of low growth and high inflation on our economy? You have to also understand economic slowdown. That is also leads the economy towards the slowdown. Low growth hampers job creations and income expansion, impacting household and other overall economy. Generally, as our growth rate shift from 9.4% during 2007 and 8, 2007 and 8, 9.4% to 2009 and 10, only 6.4%. What does it mean? Our consumption as well as investment begin to fall. And finally, that leads the economy towards the recessionary conditions. Purchasing power erosion. Why purchasing power? Less employment opportunity, less disposable income. There were the two taxes. One tax imposed by the increasing price, that is the inflation. Increasing inflation decrease the purchasing power or real income. If you say YR represent here real income, Y is the monetary income, P is the price. Increasing price will decrease the real income. In this way, purchasing power also decline. Investment and business climate also recessionary conditions means that discourage the investors. If rate of interest inflation is say this one, and profit, what it will do? It will definitely increase the profit possibilities. But market rate of interest say 17%, rate of return say 10%. Rate of return if less inflate this, what cost of credit is high, then who will like to invest? No one. That will discourage the investors to invest more in the economy. That is also the factor. Other factor, government policies and initiative. How the government restructure the economy, you can see during 2014 to 19. Government began to restructure the economy. Multiple policies, initiatives taken by the government, say monetary policy, fiscal policy. We again follow the fiscal consolidation program. We also follow the cheap monetary policy, structural reform in industrial sector, taxation reforms, and other schemes by which we can discourage the import of gold in our economy, like gold monetization scheme, Swarnim gold board scheme, so that we can decrease the demand of society for the gold. Our household sector save in two way, financial saving and physical saving. During this period 9 to 14, people were began to invest maximum in gold. Imported gold in our country increasing the current account deficit more than 5.2% of GDP during this time period. And after 2014, as government started new schemes and motivate the people to invest in other areas other than gold, imported gold, automatically that began to decrease the aggregate demands of our gold, imported gold, and current account deficit began to minimize. Other side, investment motivations through the monetary policy, tax incentive, etc., they began to increase the investment in real sector, that is industry. Industrial growth rate first of all came in positive August 2014. In this way, year by year, our economy come out from that kinds of high inflation, low growth problem. And during, as you can see, the time period during 2014 to 19, our growth rate was 7.5% per year, 7.2 to 7.5 year per year, and inflation rate was only 4.5% per year. In this way, we sort out that problem. Student, that kinds of questions you can understand with the help of theory, and as you can go in preliminary papers of UPSC previous years, mains questions of UPSC in previous year for civil service examinations, you will see there are the multiple questions which are based on theory and principle of economy. Without better understanding of that, you can't do that kinds of questions. And what is the basic problem? Students only go through the Indian economy book, Indian economy lecture, etc. But when they face the exam, they failed. Ultimately, they failed. Why they failed? Because they are not trying to understand the theory and principle of economy. For the better understanding of the Indian economy, you have to go through the theory and Indian economy. We also supporting you. You can come in our online classes, offline classes, or YouTube channel, etc., which is available here in Mukherjee Nagar. You are most welcome, and you can contact me for any query, these kinds of any query, on my mobile number 9999237051. Thank you, student.